Ethan Parker had lived most of his life on the wide, open land that stretched beyond the small town of Red Creek. Every day for him began before sunrise, with the soft glow of morning brushing the tops of the hills and the calm noise of animals waking up. He liked routine, he liked quiet. He liked knowing what each day would bring. But sometimes life places something unexpected in front of a person. Something that makes the day different from every other day before it. When Ethan drove into the livestock auction that morning, he had only one simple plan in mind: buy a few tools, check on a new batch of feed, and return home. The auction was always busy, full of chatter and movement. Truck engines hummed, animals made soft noises from their pens, and people bargained loudly over prices. Ethan wasn't a fan of crowded places, but the auction was necessary for work, so he came when he needed supplies. He parked his truck under the shade of an old tree and walked toward the main area. The sun was bright, and the dust rose with every step he took. He pushed his hat lower over his eyes, hoping to finish quickly and leave. As he walked, he greeted a few familiar faces, old ranchers who had been coming to this auction for decades. They joked loudly with one another, slapping shoulders and laughing at stories they'd told 100 times before. Ethan managed a polite smile but kept moving. He wasn't here for conversation. Inside the main shed, where equipment and tools were displayed, Ethan began checking items off his list. A new rope, replacement parts for a water pump, a few bags of mineral blocks. Everything was going smoothly until he heard raised voices near the front counter. At first, he ignored it. People argued at auctions all the time. But something about the tone caught his ear, not anger, but worry. A young woman's voice, trembling slightly as she tried to explain something. Ethan turned his head just enough to see her. She stood near the counter holding a small folder against her chest. She looked out of place among the crowd. While most people wore dusty boots and thick jackets, she wore simple jeans, a worn backpack, and a long-sleeved shirt that didn't quite hide how tired she looked. Her dark hair was tied back, but loose strands fell around her face. She kept brushing them away as she tried to speak calmly to the broker, who seemed more annoyed than helpful. "I already paid him," she said. "He confirmed everything last week. The transport slot, the place on the truck, the ride to the lodging center. I have the receipt right here." The broker sighed, waving his hand dismissively. "Like I told you, miss. Your contractor canceled. It's not my problem. You'll have to find another ride." "But I don't have another option," she said, her voice cracking slightly at the end. "Please. I'm not from here. I don't know anyone." The broker shrugged again, uninterested. "We can't help you. The slot's gone. Somebody else already paid for it." Who?" she asked quickly, hope flashing in her eyes. The broker pointed vaguely behind her. "Some rancher. I don't remember his name." Ethan stopped halfway through checking a tool. He didn't know why the conversation pulled him in, but something about the woman's anxious expression made him pause. She looked like someone who had been trying for too long to stay strong, and was now running out of ways to do so. The crowd behind her shifted and moved, not really paying attention to her problem. People had their own concerns, animals to buy, equipment to check, deals to make. No one had the time to help a stranger. Ethan took a slow breath and looked back at the items in front of him. He told himself it wasn't his concern. He didn't need to get involved. He had enough work waiting back home. And yet, his feet didn't move. His eyes drifted back to her, drawn again by the tremble in her voice. The broker turned away from her to serve someone else, leaving her standing alone with her folder hugged tightly to her chest. She looked around the auction area as if searching for someone who might understand her situation. But everyone was busy. Everyone passed by her as if she wasn't even there. Ethan didn't know her, but he understood what it felt like to stand somewhere and feel completely alone. He had felt that often in his quiet life, especially after losing a few people close to him over the years. Maybe that was why he found himself taking a few steps toward her before he could talk himself out of it. As she turned slightly, her eyes landed on him. For a second, she looked uncertain. Then a sudden realization sparked across her face, followed by a hopeful expression, as if something had just clicked in her mind. She approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," she said, shifting her weight nervously. Did you pay for a transport slot under the name Mariah Torres?" Ethan blinked in confusion. No. At least, I don't think so." He wasn't used to people approaching him so directly. She frowned slightly and looked down at her papers. "The broker said someone paid for the slot I booked. He said it was a rancher. Your truck. I saw your name on the registration when I passed by earlier. It sounded like the name on this receipt." She held it out with shaking hands. Ethan scanned the paper. There was his name, sort of. The contractor had written it quickly, with sloppy handwriting, making Parker look like Tarker. Someone unfamiliar might easily confuse it. The slot number on the paper was the same one Ethan had reserved for picking up a small crate of supplies later. "It looks similar," Ethan admitted. "But I didn't book this for you." Her face fell instantly. She pressed her lips together and tried to keep her voice steady. "It doesn't matter then," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'll figure something out." She turned away, her shoulders small and tense, as though the weight of everything she had been pushing through was suddenly too heavy. Ethan watched her take one step, then another, before she stopped, covering her face with her hands for a moment. She wasn't crying loudly or making a scene. She was just struggling. Something inside Ethan pushed forward before he fully understood it. "Wait," he called softly. She lowered her hands and turned back toward him, eyes tired but hopeful. "Are you sure the contractor didn't mix up the names?" Ethan asked. "He said everything was confirmed," she replied. "But when I arrived today, he wasn't here. His phone is off. The broker said he canceled and used the slot for someone else. I don't know if it was a mistake or something else. I just know I'm stuck." Ethan looked at the paper again, then at her, then at the busy auction around them. He didn't like jumping into complicated situations, but leaving her stranded didn't sit right with him. Before he could say anything else, she let out a tired breath and said something that caught him completely off guard. "You've paid for me. Just do it." Ethan froze, eyes widening slightly. She realized immediately how that sounded and hurried to explain. "I mean the slot," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Just the transport. You have the booking. If the contractor put my name there by mistake, then you accidentally paid for my part. I'm not asking for anything else. I just need a safe ride back to town." Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond. He didn't want to misunderstand her. He didn't want her to feel unsafe or uncomfortable around him. "That's not usually how things work," he said gently. I don't feel anything bad about it," she interrupted quietly. "I'm just out of options. I've been trying to keep everything together since yesterday. I haven't eaten much. I'm too far from home to walk anywhere. And I really don't know who else to turn to." Her voice broke at the end, only slightly, but it was enough to let Ethan see the exhaustion behind her calm expressions. He stood there for a long moment as his mind weighed the choices. Helping her meant responsibility. It meant stepping out of his quiet routine. It meant risking misunderstandings. But walking away meant leaving someone in real need without support. That didn't sit right with him. Not at all. Finally, after taking a slow breath, he said, "Let me talk to the event coordinator. If he confirms this mix-up, I'll help you get back to town." For the first time since he saw her, a flicker of relief shone in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. And though Ethan still felt unsure, still felt hesitant, he already knew he wasn't going to walk away from her problem. Not today. Ethan walked beside Mariah toward the event coordinator's small office, which was set up inside a portable cabin near the main shed. The sun outside was bright, and the air felt warm, but the tension around them made everything feel heavier. Mariah walked with her arms close to her sides, as if trying to protect herself from more disappointment. Ethan noticed that she kept glancing around, not in fear, but in uncertainty, like she was waiting for someone to tell her she didn't belong there. People passed by them, carrying boxes, calling out to one another, arguing over prices, laughing loudly in groups. No one paid attention to the quiet young woman trying her best to stay composed. Ethan saw that, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a protective instinct he hadn't expected to feel for a stranger. Inside the portable cabin, a middle-aged man with glasses and a name badge that read, Coordinator, Glenn, looked up from his desk. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone brisk but not unfriendly. Ethan stepped forward. "We need to check something about a transport booking. There might have been a mix-up." Glenn raised an eyebrow and motioned for the papers. Mariah handed the folder to him carefully, as if it held the last bit of hope she had left. He scanned the documents, tapping his finger lightly against the desk. "The contractor who signed these," Glenn said after a moment. "He left early this morning. Didn't say much. Just said he wouldn't be handling the bookings." "Did he cancel her slot?" Ethan asked. Glenn nodded slowly. "Yes. He canceled a few. But the thing is," he lifted another paper from a stack on his desk, "someone else paid for this particular slot afterward." Mariah's eyes widened. "So that means I really did lose it." "Not exactly," Glenn said, adjusting his glasses. "It looks like the contractor might have mixed names. The slot number on your receipt." He pointed at the paper. "Matches the one paid for by a rancher. But the name written here is messy. Could be Torres, could be Parker. Hard to tell." "So it isn't clear whose booking it is?" Ethan asked. "That's right," Glenn replied. "But since you're both here and trying to sort it out, I can confirm it officially as a double booking caused by the contractor. In such cases, the person with the original receipt usually gets preference." Mariah looked hopeful for a second, then confused. "But I thought the slot was gone?" "Gone," Glenn shook his head. "It can be reassigned if both parties agree. And since the rancher is here," he looked at Ethan, "he can choose whether to pass the slot to you." The room went quiet. A small silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions. Ethan glanced at Mariah. Her shoulders had tensed again, her eyes lowered. She didn't want to pressure him, but she clearly needed help. Ethan took a slow breath. If the contractor really wrote her name by mistake, then she should have it. Mariah's head snapped up, eyes wide with gratitude. Glenn smiled slightly. "That settles it then," he said. "I'll assign the slot back to her. But," he raised a finger, "she'll need a ride in the truck." That reserved the transport. Mariah nodded immediately, almost too quickly. "I don't mind. I'm fine with that. I just need to reach the town safely. I won't be any trouble." Ethan felt a slight shift in his chest, something between relief and nervousness. He wasn't used to strangers riding with him. He lived alone most of the time, and liked it that way. But he could also see the worry lifting slightly from her face, and he knew the decision he made was right. Glenn typed a few things on his computer, printed 2 new papers, and handed them over. "There," he said. "The situation is officially corrected. You two are good to go." As they stepped out of the cabin, the sunlight hit them again, but this time it didn't feel as heavy. Mariah let out a slow breath, the kind that comes after holding everything in for too long. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to help. Most people would have walked away." Ethan shrugged slightly. "You were stuck. It was the right thing to do." She smiled faintly, but her eyes still held worry. "I hope I didn't make things difficult for you." "I'll manage," he said, lifting the corner of his mouth in the smallest hint of a smile. They began walking toward the truck loading area. As they moved through the noisy auction, Ethan noticed that Mariah didn't walk with the confidence of a person used to traveling alone. She walked like someone cautious of every step, trying not to get in anyone's way. "What happened with your contractor?" Ethan asked gently, trying to understand her situation better without making her uncomfortable. Mariah hesitated. "He was supposed to secure everything for me. I came here from another town because I heard seasonal work was available. I saved money for the trip, the room, and the transport. I trusted him." She looked down at her hands. "When I reached the station yesterday, his messages stopped. By the time I arrived here this morning, he was gone." And Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't like the idea of someone abandoning her like that, but he kept his tone calm. "And you didn't have anyone else to ask for help?" "No," she said quietly. "I don't know anyone here. and I can't afford to book anything again. That's why I panicked earlier. I thought if I lost this, I'd be stranded." Ethan nodded slowly. He understood now why she had sounded so desperate when she asked him earlier to just do it. It wasn't impatience. It wasn't rudeness. It was fear of having nowhere to go. They reached Ethan's truck, parked near the pickup station. It was sturdy, clean, and well kept, with enough space in the back to carry supplies. Ethan checked the ropes securing the crates he needed to transport. Mariah watched quietly, not wanting to get in the way. "You can sit in the front," Ethan said gently. "It'll be more comfortable." She nodded. "Thank you." As she climbed in, Ethan noticed how careful she was not to leave marks or disturb anything. It made him realize how long she must have been trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. When he got into the driver's seat, Ethan started the engine. But before pulling away, he glanced at her. "We have a bit of distance to cover before reaching town. Are you okay with long drives?" "I'm fine," she said with a small smile. "As long as I'm moving closer to somewhere safe." Ethan nodded and began driving. The road ahead stretched long and open. At first, the truck was filled with silence. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of quiet that fills the space when two people aren't sure how to begin speaking. Mariah looked out the window, watching fields roll by. Ethan focused on the road, though he kept stealing small glances to make sure she seemed okay. After several minutes, Mariah broke the silence. "Why were you at the auction today?" she asked softly. "Needed supplies," he answered. "Things break on the ranch. Animals need care. I come here once every few months." He paused. "You?" She chuckled lightly, though it was a tired sound. "Looking for work. I heard the season brings openings. I thought a new place might give me a new start." "Is that why you traveled so far?" Ethan asked. "Yes," she said, her eyes drifting back to the window. "I wanted to try something different. Something steady. Something honest." She sighed softly. "Life back home has been complicated." Ethan didn't ask more. He could tell she didn't want to go deeper into the subject. Instead, he asked a safer question. "Have you ever been around ranches before?" She shook her head. "Not really. I grew up in the middle of a city. This," she gestured toward the open fields, "is all new to me." "Then today must have been overwhelming." "More than overwhelming," she said with a soft laugh. "But I'm glad you were there." Those words landed heavier than she probably intended, and Ethan felt a warmth of sincerity behind them. The road stretched on, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. The longer they drove, the less tense Mariah seemed. She relaxed into the seat, breathing more evenly. Ethan noticed this change. Helping her hadn't been a mistake. It felt right, even if he didn't fully understand why. As they approached a small rest stop, Ethan slowed the truck. "We should take a break. It's a long drive," he said. Mariah nodded gratefully. They stepped out, stretching their legs. Ethan grabbed 2 bottles of water from the back and handed one to her. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steady now. "You don't have to keep thanking me," Ethan said gently. "Anyone in my place would have." "No," she interrupted softly. "Most wouldn't." Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded. For the first time since they met, Mariah's expression softened completely. The fear that had followed her all morning felt lighter now, like the road had washed some of it away. When they got back into the truck to continue the drive, something had changed between them. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, understanding, and though neither of them said it out loud, both sensed the same truth. This unexpected journey wasn't just about transport anymore. It was the beginning of something neither had planned, something shaped by trust, timing, and the quiet courage it takes to reach out when life becomes too heavy to carry alone. The road stretched endlessly ahead of them, long and winding, cutting through open fields and small clusters of trees. The sun had begun lowering itself toward the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and orange. Inside the truck, the atmosphere felt calmer than before. The earlier tension, fear, confusion, hesitation had slowly faded. Now, There was a quiet understanding between Ethan and Mariah, something unspoken, but real. Mariah sat with her hands resting on her lap, staring outside with a distant expression. It wasn't the same anxious look she had earlier, but something gentler, like someone finally letting their thoughts settle after being shaken for too long. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but he was aware of her every small movement. He noticed when she leaned back more comfortably. He noticed when she stopped fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. He noticed when she let out small breaths that sounded more relaxed. For a man who spent most of his days around animals and open land, Ethan was surprisingly observant of quiet human emotions. After several minutes of silence, Mariah spoke softly, almost as if testing whether her voice would disturb the peaceful air around them. "Thank you again," she said, looking down. "I keep saying it. I know. But I really mean it." Ethan's hands tightened lightly on the steering wheel. "I told you already. It's all right. You needed help." "I know," she said. "It's just, not many people help a stranger like this." Ethan glanced at her for a moment. "Maybe you just haven't met the right people yet." Mariah smiled gently, though it was small and a bit sad. Maybe. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sunlight caught the dust in the air, making tiny golden sparkles float around them. The truck rolled calmly along the road, the steady hum of the engine filling the space between them. Mariah eventually leaned her head slightly against the back of the seat. "You said you live alone, right?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "Just me and the animals." "Isn't it lonely?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but I like the quiet. I like knowing what my day will look like." After a short pause, he added, "But even with all that, a person can still feel alone, even when life is steady." Mariah looked at him, interested. "So you do feel alone sometimes?" Ethan shrugged a little. "I think everyone does, even people surrounded by others." Mariah slowly nodded, understanding all too well. "I think that's true." Ethan waited a moment before asking, "What about you?" "You said things were complicated back home." Mariah exhaled slowly. "They were. I had a job in a small store. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't stable either. Some months were hard. And then..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Some people around me made life stressful. I won't go into details, but let's just say I needed a fresh start. Somewhere new. Somewhere with honest work." Ethan nodded without pushing for more. He could tell she didn't want to explain everything, and he respected that. "So you came here," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I saved for months to make this trip. I thought I was ready for anything. But things didn't go the way I planned." He let out a small breath. "Plans rarely do." She let out a tiny laugh. "I guess not." The truck moved over a small bump, causing the crates in the back to shift slightly. Ethan checked the mirror to make sure everything was secure. When he looked forward again, he saw that Mariah was studying him, as though trying to understand the kind of person he was. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "When I said that thing earlier, the mix-up, the slot, you hesitated. I saw it. You were unsure. So why did you decide to help me anyway?" Ethan took a moment before answering. He wasn't a man who liked expressing his thoughts openly. But something about Mariah's calm, honest voice made him want to choose his words carefully. "You looked like someone who'd had a rough day," he said quietly. "And I've had days like that too. Days where all you need is one person to not turn away." Mariah listened closely, her expression soft and thoughtful. Ethan continued, "Sometimes it doesn't take much to change someone's situation. Just a little kindness. I figured if I could make things easier for you, even a little, then I should." Mariah blinked slowly, moved by the simplicity of his words. "Not everyone thinks like that." Ethan didn't argue. Maybe she was right. The road curved, leading them toward a small bridge that crossed a narrow river. The water shimmered under the fading sunlight. Mariah leaned forward slightly to get a better look through the windshield. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," Ethan agreed. When they crossed the bridge, A small breeze from the open window brushed against Mariah's face. For the first time since morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. As the truck continued down the open road, Mariah shifted in her seat and asked, "What's your ranch like?" Ethan thought about the rolling land, the wooden fences, the quiet mornings, the soft sounds of animals waiting to be fed. "Simple," he said. "Lots of open space, some barns, a few old tools that need fixing." He smiled faintly. "It's not fancy, but it's home." "Ain't," she smiled warmly. "It sounds nice. Maybe one day you'll see it," Ethan said absent-mindedly, not realizing the weight of his own words until after he said them. Mariah looked at him, surprised at first, then touched. "Maybe," she said softly. A quiet warmth spread through the truck. Not romantic, not heavy, just a gentle connection forming between two people who began the day as strangers. After a few minutes, Mariah asked, "Do you ever wish your life was different?" Ethan considered this carefully. "Sometimes. But changing everything isn't always the answer. Sometimes, life surprises you when you least expect it." Fively was sun. Mariah looked out the window again, her expression thoughtful. "Today surprised me. Good or bad?" Ethan asked. Mariah turned back to him and smiled, not the tired, forced smile she'd given earlier, but a genuine one. "Good," she said simply. Ethan felt something loosen inside his chest, something like relief. As they continued driving, the sky grew redder, signaling the day's slow ending. The open fields glowed softly under the fading light. The air smelled of grass, warm soil, and far-off wood smoke from scattered houses. Mariah lifted her hand slightly and traced her finger along the window glass absent-mindedly. "You know," she said, "I wasn't just scared about losing the transport slot. I was scared because it felt like the last bit of hope I had left." She looked at him. Everything else had already gone wrong. Ethan listened quietly. "When I saw you earlier," she continued, "I thought maybe you were the rancher who had taken the slot by mistake. I approached you because I was desperate. But also because, I don't know, something about you seemed safe." Ethan's heart tightened subtly, not uncomfortably, but with a kind of quiet meaning. "I'm glad I didn't scare you off," he said lightly. She shook her head. "You didn't. You hesitated. Yes. But you still helped." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Words felt too small for the moment. The truck carried them farther, the evening slowly approaching. The world outside looked peaceful, almost gentle, as if welcoming them into the next part of the journey. Mariah leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes for a moment. She wasn't sleeping, just resting, letting everything inside her settle. Ethan kept driving. But every now and then, he looked at her. Not out of worry, not out of duty, but because something about seeing her calm brought him a feeling he hadn't expected. Something like purpose. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, the long drive began to feel shorter, as if time itself wanted to treat them kindly. And in that quiet truck, rolling through the evening, they both felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. They weren't alone anymore. The next morning arrived quietly, with a soft glow spreading across the wide ranch fields. Ethan woke earlier than usual. Not because of chores, but because he felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He lay still for a moment, staring at the wooden ceiling of his cabin, remembering the events of the previous day. Grace's words echoed softly in his mind. Her apology, her trust, her decision to stay. Those words had settled inside him like calm water, but part of him still wondered whether this peace would last. When he stepped outside, the air was cool and clean. Birds were already awake, and the ranch felt alive in a gentle way. He found Grace sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a warm blanket. She looked peaceful, as if the quiet morning was helping her feel grounded. When she noticed Ethan, she smiled shyly. The kind of smile that comes from someone trying to rebuild their confidence slowly but surely. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Ethan replied, standing near her but giving her space. He didn't want her to feel pressured or watched. He just wanted to be there if she needed him. Grace stretched her hands toward the sunrise. "I've never noticed how beautiful mornings can be when everything is calm," she said. "I used to wake up and feel like the day was chasing me before it even began. But here, it feels different." "That's the ranch," Ethan said. "It slows you down. Makes you feel things you didn't know you were missing." Grace nodded. "I think it's helping." They shared quiet moments like that, letting the stillness of the ranch settle into their thoughts. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like both were learning how to feel comfortable with each other. When they eventually started their chores, Grace surprised Ethan by volunteering to help. He hesitated at first. "Only if you want to," he said. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything." Grace shook her head firmly. "I don't feel that way. I want to help. It makes me feel useful and normal." Her voice didn't carry sadness anymore. It carried strength. Ethan nodded, and they walked to the barn together. The horses greeted them with soft sounds, and Grace felt strangely safe among them. She had always admired animals from a distance, but had never worked closely with them before. Ethan explained each small task patiently: how to brush a horse, how to clean a stall, how to guide a nervous colt with gentle hands. Grace listened carefully and tried everything he taught her. At first, her movements were unsure, but Ethan noticed something important. She didn't give up. She tried again and again, smiling every time she improved. "You're picking it up fast," Ethan told her. Grace looked surprised. "Really? Really," he assured her. "You're good at this." The praise warmed her. It wasn't flattery. It was honest, and she felt it. As the day went on, they worked side by side. There were moments when Grace seemed lost in her thoughts, and moments when her laughter returned in soft, unexpected bursts. Ethan didn't push her or ask uncomfortable questions. He simply encouraged her and let her move at her own pace. Later in the afternoon, they sat under a large tree overlooking the fields. The breeze carried the scent of grass and warm sunlight. Grace hugged her knees and stared out at the open land. "I didn't think I would ever feel safe again," she said quietly. "But today, I did, even if it was just for small moments." Ethan didn't speak right away. He wanted to choose his words carefully. "You don't have to rush," he finally said. "Healing takes time. And you don't owe anyone a perfect recovery. You just need to take small steps. That's enough." Grace's eyes softened. "Thank you for not expecting too much." Ethan shrugged slightly. "I only expect you to take care of yourself. That's all." Grace looked at him for a long moment, noticing the sincerity in his expression. She had been so used to people expecting something in return that Ethan's patience felt almost unfamiliar, but it was genuine. She knew it. That evening, they shared dinner at the cabin. Grace had insisted on helping cook, even though she admitted she wasn't skilled in the kitchen. Ethan didn't mind. He let her chop vegetables slowly and carefully, and they laughed when she tried to flip bread and got flour all over her face. It was such a simple thing, yet Grace felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. When the meal was ready, they sat at the small wooden table. It wasn't a fancy dinner, but it felt meaningful. Grace noticed the way Ethan created a calm space around her, how he made things feel steady, not overwhelming. After dinner, the sky turned a deep shade of blue. Stars scattered across the horizon like tiny lights. Grace stepped outside and looked up, her breath catching slightly at the beauty above her. Ethan joined her quietly, standing beside her, but not too close. "It feels unreal," she whispered. "Like the world is giving me a second chance." "It is," Ethan said, "and you deserve it." Grace turned to him with a small, emotional smile. "I used to believe I didn't deserve anything good. That wasn't true then, and it's not true now," Ethan replied firmly. Grace looked down, touched by his words. "You speak like you've thought about this before." He scratched his neck awkwardly. "Maybe I have," he admitted. "I think a lot. Especially lately." Grace studied his face. There was kindness in his eyes, but also something deeper, a sort of quiet respect that made her feel seen without being judged. After a moment, she said softly, "I'm glad you hesitated that day. And I'm glad you acted for the right reasons." Ethan remembered that moment clearly, the confusion, the sudden pressure, the decision to walk away from something that didn't feel right. He didn't regret that choice. It had changed everything. "I'm glad too," he replied. Grace shifted closer. Just a little, but enough for Ethan to notice. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, she seemed grounded, like she had finally stepped onto a steady path. "You gave me something I didn't expect," she said. "A chance to breathe. A chance to feel like myself again." Ethan felt warmth spread in his chest. "I didn't do much." "You did more than you think," Grace whispered. They stood together under the stars, letting silence settle naturally between them. It wasn't the heavy silence of strangers, or the awkward silence of uncertainty. It was a soft, comfortable, quiet one that felt like the beginning of something hopeful. Grace finally spoke again. "Ethan, what happens now?" He took a deep breath. "Whatever you want. You can stay here as long as you need. You can start fresh. You can learn ranch work, or just rest. You don't owe me anything. And I won't make decisions for you." Grace absorbed his words slowly. For the first time in a long while, she felt fully in control of her own future. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. "I think," she said softly, "I want to stay for a while. I want to rebuild my life. And this place, it feels like a safe place to start." Ethan smiled gently. "Then stay. I'd like that." Grace's eyes glistened with relief. "Thank you." As the night deepened, they continued talking about the ranch, about little stories from Ethan's childhood, about Grace's dreams she had buried long ago but now wanted to rediscover. She confessed she used to love drawing and wanted to try again someday. Ethan encouraged her, promising to get her whatever supplies she needed. The bond between them grew stronger, not rushed, not forced. It was built from trust, understanding, and small moments that stitched themselves together into something meaningful. By the time Grace returned to her room, she felt lighter. She felt hopeful. She felt like her life was opening in a new direction, one she couldn't have imagined before meeting Ethan. Ethan watched her walk away, feeling both protective and respectful. He knew she had a long road ahead, but he also knew she had the strength to walk it, and he was ready to support her patiently, quietly, and without expecting anything in return. Grace lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling with a calm heart. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. She felt ready for it, and as she closed her eyes, one simple thought carried her into sleep. She wasn't alone anymore. She had found a place to heal, and she had found someone who saw her not as a burden, but as a person worth believing in.